Jumping on the conference call tonight. We are going to be covering the buyer agency agreement and what to do and prepare for your buyer appointments now that we have the new change. On October 1st, the sky is not falling. We still are all in business and we still have a lot to do. In fact, this has been a very busy week for us. The weekend was very strong. A lot of phone calls came in to me, so I anticipate having a very strong winter to finish up the year. Like to have the time to talk with you guys tonight, so just a couple housekeeping things before we get started. I do have some visuals to get started, so if you're on a phone, that's okay. You may want to get the recording after or get the visuals after the call. For those of you that jumped on late or maybe have trouble muting, I will have it moderated by Shannon. You are welcome, and since I've muted everybody's line, if you have questions, we keep it open so you can type your questions, and we will take those as we proceed through the conference call. Tonight's topic is all about the buyer agency agreement and the consultation, what to bring. So what I have to start out with tonight is an email that I sent out to one of our newer brokers with an outline, and we'll kind of cover the outline today, because if you have not done a buyer agency agreement or had a buyer agency agreement signed in your past, maybe you've been in the business 10, 15 years and you've never done a buyer agency, then this is a great class just to kind of refresh some of the basics on how to introduce it. The mistake that some of you might make if you didn't jump on the call tonight is you might just start having your buyers sign the agency agreement, and that may work, but there's a lead up, there's a process, and there's preparation to make sure that you're covering your bases and your client understands what they're signing. So yes, you could have them just sign the agreement, but I think the better approach would be to work them through the process and explain the contract more in depth. So the first thing I did for Tyler and Sam is I said, hopefully the appointment goes well. They were meeting a walk-in, somebody that had expressed interest that they wanted to buy and sell a home. And so you should be able to do short introductions talking about yourself. We do have the ability for you to have a profile designed. There's an easy way to have your paragraph. You could have a profile in your packet, but you want to basically make that client, that buyer, feel warm and friendly. Just really introduce yourself. So I'd be, hi, I'm Rochelle Wilhite. It was so nice that you took some time to meet with me and go over some of the things that I need to gather in order to make this process easier for you. There's a lot going on right now in the industry, and I want to make sure that you have the tools necessary to find the best property. So we're just going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes. This is again what I say when I talk about introductions, the next 10 to 15 minutes asking you some basic questions, understanding your needs, and then showing you and getting your okay to move forward with the process. Does that sound like something you want to do today? They say yes. Then I want to ask them some questions. Some of the questions that I ask them, I may already have this filled out. So I have a kind of a needs analysis. Some of you may have your own questionnaire or your own sheet. I used to, when I was working in the office and I had an assistant at the front desk, if the client came into, maybe 5-10 minutes early, this would be the sheet that I'd have filled out. And then I would just ask some basic questions. And while I was finishing up another appointment, the next appointment could be finishing out this needs analysis. They do this when you go to the doctors. They do this when you go to meet with your attorney oftentimes. So this is a profile that may be filled out at the top. And you maybe have, some of your qualifying questions, maybe the notes from your phone call already filled in here. And then what you're trying to do is just understand what they're looking for in that buyer consultation or that buyer meeting. So maybe you want to have this blank and they fill it in or you fill it in with their locations, their price range, their square footage, their lot size, and then you can have a really good discussion about what they need to have and what they'd like to have. This is where they really open up and tell you, Rochelle, it has to be a one level. I've got a dog, his name is Dozer, and he has to have a place to run. So if it would be nice to have, would be a fenced yard. But it's not necessary. My husband's pretty savvy and we can budget to have a guy come and put some fencing around the yard. But this is your time to really understand what they're looking to do and build more rapport. I think a mistake would be just to hurry and put something in front of them and get them to sign a contract. there's a buildup that goes into orchestrating, putting a buyer consultation or putting a buyer agency agreement in front of them. So I would lead with some sort of buyer profile sheet. If you do not have one, this is one that I'd be happy to send you. All you need to do is send me an email and I'll shoot this right over to you tonight. Then the next thing, and again, you can make this your own. I mean, if you don't like some of these questions, I can give you the Word document and you can make your own profile sheet. But this is the one I used, and I had Tyler and Sam use the other day. The next thing you want to do is just ask them questions and watch them watch you write the answers down. I think a lot of times as brokers, we seem to talk a lot and we don't spend the time in actually having our clients see us listening to them. This is a great opportunity in a buyer consultation setting where you can actually take that intake sheet and, you know, and from them, maybe have it on clipboard, maybe you have it just, you know, in your notes, but you sit there and you write as they're talking. You know, they see you putting the pen to paper and writing their answers. The next thing you want to do is to go over and give them the consultation. So we have one already built for you and you can personalize it. We talked about that a few weeks ago. If you joined Best Choice Realty in the last couple of weeks, there is our resource guide, which you will be able to go into our resource guide. And it's simply bestchoicerealtyhomes.com, bestchoicerealtyhomes.com. And what that is our resources which you could get more information. If you scroll to the bottom, you can get the quick links, which is the buyer presentation. If you need design or you need to have something personalized, you can click the learn more here on the right and you can get more information from our graphic designer on what they can do to personalize some of the materials. But if you're like me, I just got to have it. I got an appointment tomorrow. I need to have my buyer presentation ready to go. I can just click on the quick links right here, buyer presentation. And here is our enhanced. We did have this updated recently because of the changes that took place. So if you haven't been here in a while, come back and visit this site and you can download the ultimate buyer's guide right here. This is the next thing that I would go into on my appointment. And this is something you could actually have bound. Our office can have it printed in color, nicely printed and actually bound so that you can give it to them and you can have it prepared. And one of the things I like to do with my buyers is after I get done asking them some questions, I like to educate them. And so part of the education process is showing that I've prepared. I've spent some time, and this is how I'd explain it to them. I've spent some time in preparing some information that you can take with you after our appointment today. And I have this piece put together and it's designed with my testimonials and my profile and also bound or in a folder. But I can go through some of the key things. Obviously, our mission is to provide the highest quality. This is our mission. So you don't really need to go into the details or read everything that's in the package. Or if they just, have you heard of Best Choice Realty? Have you heard what I'm set out to do? Or do you know much about how I help people buy and sell homes? This is the place where you can describe more about our company. But really you want to get into page 5 and page 6. And maybe 7 and then conclude with page 9. So really you want to, I'm trying to scroll slow, but this computer is actually very fast moving mouse. But here's page 5, when it talks about the step-by-step process. This is the part where I may want to ask a few questions. And one of the questions I like to ask is, how long has it been since you bought a home? Or is this your first time? And when they say, well, it's been a while, Rochelle, since we bought a home, I will want to go through, well, this page in your package talks about the process from step to step. And so what we are doing right now is we're on step 3 is really starting to decide what areas interest you the most and what you need and what you want to have. So tell me, what areas interest you the most? Oh, you like the north end of Seattle. Have you considered places like Edmonds or, going up into Lake Stevens, which may be Snohomish County? No, Rochelle, it's too far. It's going to take me a while to get to work. I understand. Again, they watch me taking my pen and putting it down the notes on the intake sheet. So I use that intake sheet as my piece Well, I go over and I flip through this package in front of them. And I spend some time asking. And one thing I want to point out on this step by step is I want to make sure that they understand I will be with them through the entire duration of this process. Not all brokerages work that way. In fact, in many brokerages, we don't name names, in many brokerage, they have a department or they have a group or a team that handles different aspects of this process. And oftentimes there are things that are missed or your best interests are not at hand because that same person that helps you find is not the same person that negotiates or that helps you with the inspection repairs or assesses the situation when an appraisal does not come at value. And I'm the type of agent who wants to make sure that you are taken care of from point A to point Z. And so I will be attending your closing or assisting with your walkthrough when we need to go in and evaluate the property right before closing. That's the type of broker that I am. And I make sure I point that out because that's the differentiator between you and, say, another agent from another company that may be disjointed, unhappy clients. At Best Choice Realty, we have highly experienced brokers that understand this process from point A to point Z. And so one of the things I want to point out to all my buyers is, what is this going to cost me? And so I want you to be prepared when we go out and start looking at properties. What are the, what are some of the monies? What are the things that we have to make sure that we cover? And so I cover this with my buyers and I outline, inspection. Do they have money set aside for the inspection? This is their time to say, gosh, Rochelle, I don't get paid until, November 1st. I'm only on a monthly type of payroll. And that's good for me to know so that when I'm going out to show homes and negotiate on their behalf, I know what their earnest money situation is or how much money they have set aside for the down payment. Or they'd say, Rochelle, I don't know if I have enough money for the inspection. I can kind of guide them and direct them on finding them an inspector that may take payment later or may take a credit card. Those are things that you need to know before you start going and showing them homes. We've updated this because the prices have gone up, not only for appraisal, but also for inspections. Those pricing that were maybe in our older buyer consultation page, that's been refreshed to give them a good estimate on the inspection costs that they could incur. This could include, that's why it's $450. You might find something that's less expensive, but then they may have to pay more for, say, mold or for lead testing or for testing to get something looked at by another inspector of their choosing. So, or a sewer scope, which in Tacoma, you really got to do a sewer scope in order to assess whether that has issues with the sewer line. So important testing is why we came up with the range 450 to 700. Closing costs, these costs can include a lot of different fees. Many people don't realize that closing costs have to be rolled into the purchase price as well as the commission potentially. So it describes what closing costs are all about, such as title and escrow and lender fees. We talked about one client last week, not even understanding that they actually had to pay the escrow fees. They're responsible in Washington for paying half of the escrow fee, and they did not know that. They thought that part of the change was that they didn't have to pay the title and escrow fees. That is not the case. So this is the time for you to educate them about what the costs are to purchase a property. I've said in some of my consultations, most brokers, they don't even spend the time to outline the costs that are associated with buying a home, and that's not the type of buyer's agent that I am. I want you to understand, how much it's going to take and how much money you need to set aside so that you're prepared for the purchase when the time comes. This is a tip sheet that a lot of lenders don't spend the time. Maybe they're going too fast. And if you have a first-time home buyer, you definitely want to go through some of the things to consider so that they don't mess up the finance process, such as sometimes people don't realize that they shouldn't apply for a new credit card. And by adding another credit line, say they want to go and buy some furniture down the road after they apply for another credit card, and then all of a sudden they can't get a loan. So this is super frustrating for new buyers when they find this out, and they always say, well, why didn't you remind me? Or why didn't my lender remind me? It really is the lender's job to, explain what they should and should not do. but this is something that you want to also go over with them, especially if they're newer to the business or they don't have the greatest credit or they need to get a loan. This is something you want to include. The testimonials are nice to have, but I don't spend the time going through that. It's in the package for them to read. But I do want to explain what I do to help them buy a home. And I have this part memorized, what I'm going to do to meet your home. So when we start to go out and look at properties, I'm going to keep you informed. I'm going to remain 100% committed. I'm going to help you negotiate the lowest price, meet your budget, and match you to the best properties that I can find. All it's going to take is for me to work exclusively for you. In order for me to do that, I have a buyer agency agreement here that I'm going to need your signature on. Let me go to it real quick. So it's on the buyer agency agreement. So I never really had to describe what I'm going to do because I did a good job throughout the presentation of describing what I'm going to do to earn their trust and their business. So at this point, what I would have filled out, if I was meeting them in person, I would have this already typed out or put in blue ink, the date, which would be October 7th, 2019. I'd have that written in. I'd put their names, their full legal name here in the buyer section. And then I would put the name here is your name. So your legal name, you're the broker as outlined. So it's basically giving us the right at Best Choice Realty to enforce the buyer agency agreement. This buyer agency agreement was designed with a lot of thought involved, a lot of explanation that it wasn't there before. And it's meant to be a standalone piece. So if you want to go out the door with the buyer agency agreement without any education, without any consultation, you can have this. And it definitely has some verbiage that will help you and help the client understand what the October 1st change is all about. I don't think the buyer agency agreement that the MLS has produced is, how do I nicely say this, is done in such a way where the consumer it's educated. I think it's confusing because they have an exclusive and non-exclusive. This is just an exclusive agency agreement. So there's no confusion when it comes to that. It also has, if you did not fill out anything in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 throughout, if you did not have anything filled out, it would still be an enforceable contract. So that also protects you and protects the firm as we start to work with buyers. The buyer agency agreement that the MLS has put together, which is 41A, and you guys are certainly welcome to use 41A, you do have to make sure you fill in the blanks on 41A. And if you don't, that's not an enforceable contract. So make sure that you are reading through both. And if you want to, you're welcome to use the 41A or the 41A we've put together here. I would say that our 41A has a bit more to it than the one you'll find on the MLS. So if you have not read it, if I was explaining it to Shannon, which Shannon's here in the office right now moderating, I would say, Shannon, so what I have here is the buyer agency agreement. It describes the services that I will render. In fact, I have put together, when it says other provisions, if you don't fill anything in, it's okay. But if I put other provisions here and I said see Exhibit V, I could make the ultimate, let's see here. I could make, sorry about that. I could make my services page here part of my agreement if I chose to. Now, if you don't want to, that's up to you. This would just be a standalone page that you can or you don't have to use. But this is quite a comprehensive list. When I look at 61 things here, this is a lot that my buyer's agent's doing for me that, you know, not all the best agents are doing for their buyers. These are services provided by the best buyer's agents. That's a standalone piece that you could, in essence, use in the other provisions. I could see a lot of you maybe modifying, customizing, personalizing that buyer. The best buyer agents do this and including that as part of your buyer agency agreement. I think that would be very, very well done if you did it correctly. If you don't fill it in, no biggie. You can basically, this is pretty much covers you, and this is not in the 41A. It says the broker will exercise good faith effort to locate and show real property as described by the buyer, prepare and negotiate offers, and to perform applicable services to facilitate the closing of a purchase or a commercial lease. Again, we want to make sure we cover the commercial. We do a lot of commercial in our office, as well as working with buyers and finding and locating properties. The broker will work at all times in the buyer's best interest, including duties of this agreement, and not with any other broker, salesperson, or owners with respect to viewing properties. My concern that I have here, you guys, is that if you do not explain the scope of your services, or you explain what they're signing, they may sign something electronically with another firm. There are two big firms in our area that I've spoken with, and that are very big about having their buyers sign electronically online. And so they may have signed something on a website that is in contradiction to this buyer agency agreement. When you've spent the time to sit down and educate them, I want them to understand that that the buyer will be working exclusively with Best Choice Realty and us during this period of agreement. I want to have that conversation and the debate, because I think some people will try to make this an online thing. And I want to have that debate where we have another firm that maybe puts it online, and then the client has not, they have not exercised good judgment in explaining the contract. I don't know how that will hold up in court, but I want to make sure that you guys understand that the scope of services is described in this agreement, and that if another company has them sign something online, that could contradict what we have here, and that could provide an issue down the road. So make sure you've explained what your duties are that they have not signed. Ask them, quite frankly, have you signed anything online or in person with another buyer's agent or a buyer's broker? And if the answer is yes, you need to step away and have them go work with that buyer's agent. If they have not, then it's perfectly fine for them to sign this. That gives them the right to go ahead and work with them and offer them the full service that you guys are going to do. The period of the agreement is 120 days. If you have a client who's like, Rochelle, I want to just work with you for 30 days, or I want to work with you for 60 days, that I'd rather have you come to me and say, Rochelle, can you modify this buyer agency agreement? I'd be happy to. If you want to, you could cross this off, but also make sure, just like all the other agreements, if anytime you cross something off, it must have an initial next to it by both parties. That means if the 120 days was lined out and you had to change it to 30 days, it would require your initial and the buyer's initial next to that change in order to make it effective. The area is already filled out, and it's to cover everywhere in Washington State. We service all of Washington State. In fact, we are just doing a couple deals in Spokane recently and one in Vancouver. So we're really pushing the boundaries of the state of Washington. So our buyer agency agreement covers the entire state of Washington. The compensation here is also outlined, and we, again, on prompting from some of you on the call like a couple months ago when we had a call about compensation, you would ask for my attorney to write in a retainer fee. We did that so that you could get compensated if you do not want to have your buyers, you want to run around showing properties and not be compensated for the gas and the time that it takes to work with the buyer. We have put a retainer fee, which is non-refundable. However, the retainer fee will be reimbursed to them as an additional fee at closing. So this retainer fee is something that we will hold them to if it's filled out. If it's zero, it's zero. If it is filled in, we will go ahead and wrap that in. Some of you may choose to use that as an option, and that is perfectly fine with our buyer agency agreement. The section B is the most important. If you don't fill it out, it's 3%. If you are accustomed in some areas to doing a 2.5, then you would want to put in 2.5 right here in this section. If you put in the dollar amount, that is perfectly fine. But if there is something greater than, it says right here, in the event the commission paid by the buyer or paid by the seller is more than the 2.5, say they offered a 3, then you would get the difference. Should the seller fail to close through no fault of the buyer, the fees will be due. And if the buyer defaults, the full fee will be due and payable to Best Choice Realty immediately by the buyer. So this is a very simple, very well thought out buyer agency agreement designed by our attorney. and it does hold up in court. So we have won in using our buyer agency agreements. If the buyer or any person affiliated with the buyer enters into a contract within the 90 days following the period that is introduced, so we put a contract together, we got a buyer, but they basically try to cut us out of the deal, our attorney will go after that as well. They'll go after that commission that was owed to Best Choice Realty. There is a section in number 5 that talks about the VA transactions. Unfortunately, due to VA transactions will be conditioned upon commission being paid by the seller. So that is a debate that we're having right now. There isn't too many contracts, too many homes right now where the VA is having to come up with their own commission because they're not allowed to do that. The VA does not allow it. And so that will be an interesting debate that we're going to have to work through in the next few months in terms of VA. If there was zero commission offered and we have to, in essence, collect commission, a retainer could be seen as contribution, but maybe not. Maybe we can overcome that with the retainer. So again, more to come when in regards to the VA. There are some changes that are happening that we will launch in the later phone call in regards to VA, some new changes that are coming out just in the next month or two. So we got well versed on it in the last, actually last week we took a class on VA. There are some new changes that will actually help us in negotiating and finding VA opportunities. So that may not be, it may work itself out just with the changes that we're going to see. It does talk about dual agency and the conflict of interest in our buyer agency agreement. That also describes that in the buyer agency agreement, but a little bit more detailed in terms of dual agency and the conflict of interest. We also have a section that's disclaimer. So if you are using a buyer agency agreement and there are some issues down the road with maybe something you may have said, this says that the buyer understands that Best Choice Realty nor you is an expert in the matters of law, tax, financing, survey, engineering, structural, environmental, and other physical conditions of the property. And there has been some times that our attorney has dealt with brokers, none of ours. Luckily for me, we haven't had anybody say that they say something in person and then their buyer ends up suing them or suing the company that they work for. We have not had any kind of lawsuits in regards to that, but our attorney is thinking down the road and wants to protect you and to protect us as a firm from those potential claims. So we did go ahead and write that into our buyer agency agreement that hopefully will help us down the road. And they're basically saying that the buyer is solely responsible to make all inspections and investigations necessary to satisfy the buyer as to the suitability and the value of the property prior to closing the purchase of the property. So that clause right there is a bit more robust than even the buyer agency agreement on the MLS. Although the MLS did update their buyer agency and did include information about inspections in the buyer agency agreement that they wrote. This is number 8 and number 9 are just carryovers from the last one, so I don't need to go into it. But we do have a non-discrimination clause that was added also that was set forth with RCW code 49.60 that also is a law against discrimination, which a lot of us practice in a very important, where we are a discriminated class. And so we want to make sure that there's non-discrimination, that the property will be shown and made available to buyer without regard to the race or gender of the parties. So that is important, and you can point that out if you want to your buyers. Have the buyer sign it, then you sign it, and we have an agreement. Again, you have to give them a copy. They have to acknowledge receipt. So I would highly encourage you to use Transaction Desk to get their electronic signature on this, or make sure when you go home, say I was meeting with Shannon today and I was getting her signature on this in person, I would want to scan this and also send them a copy along with the pamphlets that I'm required to give her as well. So that's what I would do when I got back to my home office. My business practice would be to say, Shannon, it was so nice to meet with you today to show you some properties. Attached are the pamphlets or the disclosures I'm required to send you, along with your signed buyer agency agreement. We look forward to finding and locating and negotiating the best property for you and your family. And then I send that out, and that's just my business practice. So that's how you do a tight buyer agency appointment, introducing the buyer agency agreement. It is 6 o'clock. I didn't plan it. I talked really fast because I knew I had to get through a lot of this. But I do want to go over just really quickly the services provided by the best buyer agents. I've had this Cheryl McLaren, she spent some time with the title and a lender to go through this. She's going to go ahead and use this on her buyer agency agreements as a way to introduce. Maybe she doesn't need to do a buyer consultation, but she wants to lead with this and then have them sign the agency agreement. It's perfectly fine for you to go through these. This is what you're going to do for them. You're going to have a personal consultation to understand their needs and their wants. You're going to speak with for sale by owners. You're going to attend brokers' opens and open houses and attend trainings and obtain floor plans if available. Assess the seller's timing. Get information about the homeowners associations. Provide copies to the buyers. Set up home warranties if applicable. Obtain pre-approvals from their loan officers. There's a lot of things that a buyer's agent conducts. And then I came up with 61 things. So, I mean, you can go through this. I even included this, that we have professional transaction management for improved communication and easy access to their file. Some of you spend money in paying for a transaction coordinator to help you and assist you with your paperwork. You know what? Tell them that, because that's an important point. Not all the brokers have that type of level of service, or brokerage firms have the level of service and overseeing the paperwork like we do at Best Choice Realty. I mean, our paperwork goes through approximately 2 to 3 employees just to get to the close, to make sure that we have all the paperwork necessary to make sure that we can pass an audit with flying colors, and that you guys can have the paperwork necessary in case down the road we had an issue or a complaint filed against your license. So we do a lot of work for the buyer, and I don't feel like that's being portrayed in the media right now. I've been very quiet about the issue. I'm going to stop being so quiet about the issue. I've already reached out to a few people to understand what they're doing. I'm not going to stand by and let the buyer's agent get ripped from our hands because some online company wants to get them to sign something. So be very, very upfront with your buyers and let them know that we're not an online-based company. We're a local company that helps buyers get the best deal possible. And end with that and have them sign the buyer agency agreement and be extremely confident that you're going to help them find this and help negotiate on their behalf, because this is 61 things. And I don't think they realize what a buyer's agent, really a good or a better or a best buyer's agent, will do for them. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I'll stay on a little bit later if you have questions. Some of you are still struggling with how to pitch this. I'd love to take your questions. If there were a few of you that typed, Shannon can hopefully bring me up to speed. I'll stay on a little bit later if you guys want to stay on for a few minutes. Go ahead. Shannon, any questions out from the field?
Nothing yet. You guys, looks like we've been responding to chat, but no questions so far. It looks like we're getting good reception from all of you. So thank you for that.
Hey, Rochelle, it's Cheryl. Can I ask a question?
You bet.
Okay, so I run into a situation where I get online leads, and so they're not leads that I've talked to before, and I think that this is pretty overwhelming to hit somebody off right away when we do still have a pretty fast-moving market, and we want to show them the house and everything. Okay. What do you think about giving one freebie, and then at the end of that showing, after you've had some time to build a bit of a relationship with them, say, okay, well, we have to continue on and to show homes, I'd love to work with you. Mm-hmm. Here is what I will do for you, and present it at the end of that first showing. Because I think at the beginning of that first showing is
too much. Yeah, no, that's
really
good point. Yeah. So let me back up to answer Cheryl's question, because it's a really good one, and it's in prior calls that I've done, Cheryl, I have covered the basics of when do you do it, how do you do it, where do you meet. And I think a perfect opportunity is at that first meeting to do a buyer consultation, and I'm all for giving them a freebie. But at at the last appointment. Don't leave the door, you know, and say, okay, I'll talk to you next time. You really need to get there. You need to help them understand, here's what it's going to take to find them another home or get another, you know, tour scheduled. And go through, at a minimum, Cheryl, I think I would go through at least what the services that you provide, have that in a folder, and then have the buyer consultation, have the buyer agency agreement ready to go, filled out, so all they have to do is sign it. And then you can schedule.
Yeah, I take one of our BCR folders with me, and I have the law of agency and some of the pamphlets in it and the house that they're seeing, and I think I'm just going to include my profile, the 41A and the Exhibit B in it, and tell them that this will take a little bit longer because this is our first session. We'll have a lot to review at the end of our first showing and prep them that way. What do you think of that?
I think it's fantastic. I think we have to respond to how quick people want to go out. I mean, if I was going to go online and, you know, maybe I was going on Zillow and I found 4 properties I wanted to see, and you're my Zillow, you know, agent, you know, I'm going to expect that you're going to schedule those appointments for me, and we're going to go meet. So I'm going to follow you typically, right? And I'll meet you at the first house. So what Cheryl's doing, I think, is what is realistic. By the end of that appointment, you have your tools, you have your package put together, and you just, before you leave the kitchen, before you know, exit out of the property, just say, did you have some questions? I have a few questions for you. And then you whip out your little sheet, take a few notes down, and give them the package and get their signature on the agency agreement. It doesn't take longer than 10 minutes. If you guys are taking longer than 10, 15 minutes, you're taking too long. So you need to get to a point where you can do it in 10 or 15 minutes. I have done this before, Cheryl, in other states. In Colorado and in Utah, they had to get really good at putting this in front of people, and they did exactly what you talked about. They'd show the properties, but at the end of the appointment, they had to break out their little package and then get their signature because it had to be submitted to their brokerage firm. It was required. We had to have it in, we had to have it in Zip Realty. It had to be in Zap. We actually had to load it. It was one of the required documents, if you can believe it.
I remember Zap.
Yeah.
Oh, good old Zap. Well, thank you for being such a great broker and such a great leader in prepping our team. I have a lot of agents from other brokerages calling me, what is this? What do we do? You know, their brokerages aren't doing what you're doing. So thank you for being the broker that you are.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate your help with building this so quickly, Cheryl. That was nice to have this to work from. This thing I have on the screen. Anything else?
We're a team, man. We're a team.
I love it. Okay, great. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, this is Emily.
Go ahead, Emily.
I have a question about sending out the disclosure, you know, the different pamphlets and what have you. I'm trying to send them out really early, but technically, aren't we supposed to send those to people before we like get a listing agreement, or is it okay afterwards, or what's the time?
Really should, the timing for the pamphlets is really before you put a contract in front of them. That is what the state law says. So any pamphlets should be sent ahead of time. And I would, to the point, I talked about this a few weeks ago, Emily, but RE/MAX is even going so far as to not only including the pamphlets, but writing, and I think it's a great idea, writing sample on the purchase and sale agreement so that they understand, especially with the people that are on the, you know, that Cheryl's working with, that are coming from the internet, they want to have time to absorb all the information, right, and to read through it. So RE/MAX, and maybe we should do it too, you know, put sample on our purchase and sale agreement, just the basics, you know, so they can't use it, but they understand, they can read through it, you know, all of the things that go into buying a house and what you have to, you know, I'll fill it in. I'll go over this when we meet in person, but I want you to have that along with the pamphlets ready to go for you.
Yeah, so, I do that, especially with first-time home buyers. I try sometimes because especially when you think you're going to be in a hurry, you don't want to just sign and turn it in.
Yeah, you want to have time to read through what they're signing. So that's to the pamphlets though, Emily, right away. The moment you meet with them or you start communicating with them, you can send that ahead of time. Even if you don't even end up working with them, what's the harm?
Right. Thanks.
Good question. Anything else?
Random question, but I do have a question. Because when working on a team, one of the benefits and strengths was saying how many negotiating combined years we had together.
Good.
So yeah, so one quick, I love actually being not on a team for exactly the reasons that you said, because we're there from the beginning from A to Z. So do you know off the top of your head ish an estimate number about how many cumulative years our own office has, like let's say in Tacoma, negotiating experience?
Combined experience of all the agents in Tacoma.
Yeah, or even like I know that that's a very specific question, or if there's like another statement that I can say that would be as powerful of we have, because for Ben and I, we can say we've been in the industry for 3 years, but when we're competing against people who've been in the industry for a lot longer, we would rather say our office actually has this amount of years of cumulative. So do you know of a statement that might be just as powerful?
Yeah, Shannon's our operations manager. I'm gonna put her on the spot.
Well, one of the things that I've heard people say, so we've had an agent, for instance, who was taking a luxury home, that they'd never done a luxury home over 1.5 million. And they were so concerned because they're like, I've never done this type of price point before. What do I do if they say, what type of experience do you have with a luxury home? And when asked that question, generally what we tell people is say, you know what, we're a team here. Go to Matrix and look up all of the listings that Best Choice Realty has done as a whole that are over 1.5. And when she pulled that up, she's like, no problem. The seller signed their listing agreement, no problem.
Yeah.
Because we have many, many sales, many, many millions of dollars of sales that we've done for 1.5 million or more. So I would kind of probably think of something like that, where you could pull probably some gross volume or some gross sales in Tacoma specific area, and that's very easy to pull on Matrix.
I'll do one thing better. I'll post on the BCR Facebook group what our average. I think you guys would find it humorous to find out how many. We have people that have been in the business a long time. So if you want the average, I think that would be kind of fun. I'll follow up with you on that. And I can get you kind of an average, I would say, of real estate experienced years. For some of those that are new to the business, that might be something you want to highlight, that, hey, at Best Choice Realty on average, we're, double the age or double the years that a typical brokerage firm would have. For those of you that are like that, that would be powerful. So I'll get back to you on that. But I would say definitely with what you guys are doing, like husband and wife teams, those types of partnerships, I think you could easily modify this and go out the door really, showcasing what you do together. I think that, there's things that you do well that Ben or Steven might do better, so you can come play off of that. So we do have some really successful teams, and they do break out these 61 things, and it really empowers the buyer to feel like they've got somebody working on their behalf and doing it well. So yeah, I'd say take this and modify if you could, and put your branding on it, and you guys are ready to go.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Anything else? Oh, time for one more question. I pick on Shannon then if I don't have another question. So Shannon, what's the question that kind of comes through your mind with all of this?
I guess do you think, so this is a question that some people have asked me, do you think that buyers are going to be having multiple appointments similar to listing appointments where they're going to be interviewing buyer's agents?
Yes. I do think that. I think buyers, because of the changes, they're not, especially in the buyers that are coming through in the last, I would say, the end of the millennials and kind of new buyers that are going to be buying homes, they actually are the type of buyers, and I haven't found a study that I like yet that can validate what I'm saying here, but I know it's a fact because we have more people going to buyer classes, those Washington State Home Finance Commission classes, the first-time home buyers. We have record number of people attending these types of classes, and it's not because the program's any different or because they are getting information online. I think the generation coming up is wanting to be educated, and they're wanting to spend time and work with professionals that are wanting to educate them in a way that makes sense. I mean, they're buying something that's $250,000, for heaven's sake. So they want to feel like they are part of the process And I think the winning strategy is the buyer's agent that is able to spend the time and explain things to them so that they understand. And once they understand and once they've built enough loyalty and trust, you'll have no trouble getting them to sign the agreement. But to answer your question, Shannon, yes, I do think as we go forward, you may have more other brokers that say, hey, come to my class or sit down with me and I'll go to coffee with you. And they may say, you know what, I want to interview another person. I don't feel good about, maybe you were late, maybe you showed up, maybe you didn't have all of the figures or the market statistics, or you didn't have the right education or the package. I think it's the buyer's right before they sign something that they need to trust that person. And so I do think that there will be times where you may go out the door, and if you don't have your stuff together, they may choose not to sign, and then they end up finding another buyer's agent to represent them. So be prepared for that. I think at this point, people are just trying to understand and make sense of the agency agreements. So that might be something down the road. Okay. Have a great night, you guys. We'll talk to you next Monday. We'll cover another aspect of the buyer process next Monday. And if you have any questions in the meantime, let me know. Or if you need the little worksheet, send me a quick email and I'll be happy to forward it over to you tonight. Have a great week. Bye.
Thank you.